Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So checking out a fun and interesting episode for you guys this evening because we've been talking a lot recently about just how good emulation is in 2025. All of the MAME updates, all of the new PlayStation 2 emulation for RetroArch. I've been saying that emulation has never been better and we are so lucky to have it. So I figured I would take a look at something that basically is an extinct platform at this point in time that emulates us well enough to realize how much better it could technically be. And that is the Sega Hikaru. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. Now I've talked about Hikaru on the channel in the past a long time ago because I have been trying to find a working Sega Hikaru board for years now. Unfortunately, I've been completely unsuccessful buying multiple boards and having them shipped to me either completely broken in the box as they weren't packed well, or in one instance the seller accidentally just dropping it when he was trying to put it in the box, breaking it. It is just one of those cursed boards, and it's all down to a manufacturing error where basically they forgot to tin one of the sides of the pads on some of the ball grid array chips, so if you bump it, the chips just fall off, then you have to reball the entire thing, and it's not like there's that many out there in the first place. So this is an instance in which emulation is kind of keeping the dream alive for a Sega platform, but also isn't complete enough to actually be able to play the games from start to finish and enjoy them. And trust me, for the few games that are actually on the Sega Hikaru, they are absolutely some of the best games Sega made of that generation, and people not being able to play them is absolutely missing out. Now I am using Demul here, which is no longer in active development, and the last version of Demul is the one I am using right now. And while Hikaru emulation does work, it definitely has graphical glitches, and unfortunately a lot of the games are going to freeze and not be able to be played from start to finish. And that is not a knock on the emulation. Getting it this far is impressive in its own right. Unfortunately, the developer or developers of that basically decided they were no longer interested in developing Demul, so it hasn't been updated for years now. So this is as good as Sega Hikaru emulation gets, and it would mean that somebody else would have to step in and kind of continue along the process. But I don't believe anything like Demul is open source, so basically people would have to start from scratch to try to get these games running. But something like Planet Harriers here is a game that I've been desperate to get into my collection for years now, because I have tried to play this on Demul multiple times, and it either freezes in the second or third stage, and I've never actually seen the ending of this outside of playing it in an arcade like 20 years ago. I put enough quarters in to see the ending of the game, and that's the last time that's happened, and that really is surprising as far as Sega is concerned. Think of every other Sega platform out there: Dreamcast, NAOMI, NAOMI 2, Model 1, 2, and 3, System 32 and its derivatives. Those all emulate basically perfectly, and you can play the entire library of those platforms from start to finish, enjoying yourself just like it was a video game you put into a console at home. But Sega Hikaru is the outlier here, and if you were curious, this is basically based on NAOMI hardware with a lot of different additional silicon put on board as well to give it way more power than Dreamcast or NAOMI could. It's getting very close to NAOMI 2 standards, and even though the library isn't immense, there's only 5 games on Hikaru, and they are awesome, and they deserve to be preserved and appreciated by everyone into the future. But unfortunately, that's just not the stage we're at with Hikaru emulation. Of all the games here, I would probably say the NASCAR game, which I'll show you in a bit, emulates the best, but even that has enough graphical glitches where you're kind of distracted from what's actually going on. But you'll see here as we get into the second stage of Planet Harriers, Foreo, the minute I actually take control, I'm going to be able to move around for a few seconds. But when you see the screen stop moving, that is when the game has frozen on me. So in this instance, I was only able to play the first stage, and then it died there. Sometimes you can get to the third stage though and be able to play that, but it definitely will freeze 99 out of 100 times if you're actually trying to get to the end of the game. Let's move over to Star Wars Pod Racer, another awesome Sega arcade racing game. It might still exist in a few arcades out there, but as far as Demul is concerned with Hikaru emulation, it is just messy enough where you kind of have to fight it. The sound is off, and it really kind of just kills your enjoyment. Now I'm going to give you a soundtrack sample, but not of this level because the audio is corrupted. It's just going to hurt your ears. I will give you a different level, and the audio does sound good, so you can get a sense of what Hikaru sounds like. 45 seconds, I'll be right back and show you more games you basically can't play anymore today though. You can hear that the sound is pretty put together, but in this water stage, hitting the water basically just creates a static effect that you do not want to listen to. Or maybe because there was a tiny bit of Star Wars music underneath there, maybe I had to mute the whole thing and you didn't get it. Just be aware that again, this game is a game that technically works on Demul, but not well enough that you can actually sit down and enjoy it. And that's why I always classify emulation as the following three options. You have games that don't work whatsoever, they're just not playable. You have games that are experienceable, like something like Hikaru, where you can get a sense of what it's doing, but you can't just sit down and enjoy it. And then you have playable, which is something that you can sit down and enjoy like you were sitting in an arcade. It might not be perfect, but it's good enough for you to really get a sense of what the game's doing and for you to have fun with it. So unfortunately, Hikaru just isn't there yet, and that is absolutely surprising as far as Sega hardware is concerned. Think of it this way, every single Capcom arcade board out there, and you can emulate. For the most part, I'd say like 95% of Namco stuff emulates as well. There's a few outlying games, and pretty much every other manufacturer, most of their good stuff is emulatable. Somebody like Taito with some of their Type 0 PowerPC based hardware that doesn't emulate yet, but it only had 3 games, none of them really hit, and it's Taito, so that makes a little bit more sense. But something like Brave Firefighters here, I did get a chance to play the cabinet some years ago, and it is just an awesome light gun style game where you're fighting fires and not monsters or anything else in front of you, and it is the type of game that I feel like everyone would want to play and would enjoy. But you'll see there, the mayor who's about ready to get trapped in a fire is missing his face, so he's already having a lot of problems today before that fire actually breaks out. And this is another game, it has a lot of graphical corruption, but you can kind of work around that. In some instances it's very funny to see what corruption actually occurs, but it is another game that's basically almost guaranteed to freeze. There is only one path through the title that'll keep it from freezing for most people long enough to see the credits scroll, but if you make any mistakes and don't take the proper path in the game, you're going to be met with a freeze condition. But I love this woman here is just completely missing her face, and when we actually get into the game and one of the firefighters rescues a victim here, you're going to see exactly how it looks. And I would say it is probably one of the most hilarious things going on, but of course, as far as emulation quality is concerned, it is not correct, because this firefighter picks up an invisible victim, he's missing his torso and also his head. It kind of feels like some sort of quasi-horror mime just moving around, which is really funny for the video, and it's probably what I'll use for the thumbnail. When we talk about emulation and just where it can go in the future, definitely not something we are looking for. And that really is the thing. I don't want you to think that this is a knock against Demul. Getting it this far was an amazing job, and it's totally fine for developers to basically say, you know what, I've done what I can, I'm no longer interested in this, I am moving on. And no developer owes anyone anything if they're doing it for free whatsoever. People do these things in their spare times as labors of love to keep the dream alive for a lot of these games. But I do hope somebody or a group of somebodies in the future picks up something like Demul's code, if they possibly can get access to it, and improves Hikaru emulation, because it is a board that is very deserving of the games being emulatable and playable by everyone. And again, it is an exceedingly rare arcade board that's incredibly delicate. Even if you have a working Sega Hikaru board today, it doesn't mean it's going to work in the future. If you try to move from cabinet to cabinet and you bump it the wrong way, one or more of the ball grid array chips could just completely fly off. But you'll see here, we're trying to keep the mayor safe from the fire, but we're losing a lot of time, and that is because you actually can't see where the mayor is. You only have to look at that little tiny shadow on the bottom of the screen towards the right to be able to understand what's going on. So even if you do take the right path and you do see the credits scroll, it's really hard to call this one playable, but you can get a sense of what it was trying to do. Now let's move over to the NASCAR game on the platform, the one game that probably works the best than any other but still isn't quite complete, and it is going to be your next soundtrack sample as well, because this one has really good audio quality, but you'll see there the layer priority is just not working. Go ahead and listen for 35 seconds. I'll be back to show you a little bit more Hikaru gameplay.
3, 2, 1, go! Green, green, go, 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 go!
The race is underway!
Line them up, one at a time. Come on, step on. Clear.
Now I actually had to manually insert some engine noises there as well because that song does have lyrics and I was worried about the licensing property of it. But if you actually play the game, you don't get any engine noise whatsoever. You just get the announcer as well as the lyrics and music underneath it. So that definitely is something that isn't working. But if you just took a screenshot of this here right now, you would think that it was working exactly as expected. But if you watch those cars towards the wall there, they're going to fall behind the textures and polygons. So there is some sort of Z priority issue as far as how this is working is concerned. If we go to the next course in the game as well, where it's going to have some more textures on the ground, you're going to see that entire cars just basically disappear underneath them, like right here. So this is the most impressive Hikaru emulation of all of the games that work on Demul, but it still is something that isn't completely buttoned up. If you take a look at the rear view mirror at the top, you're going to notice that all of the sky and all of the ground texture completely do not render in there, as does most of the stuff on the left and right hand side of the track. And even if I crash there, it still has the same effect, which is to say one of Sega's rarest and most powerful 3D arcade boards before they just basically started putting PC parts in a box just does not emulate well enough to be playable by anyone. And because the boards are incredibly rare and incredibly delicate at the same time, we're running into a situation in the future where if emulation doesn't improve, you may end up not being able to play Hikaru games the way they were intended to be played. Because you leave me a comment down below and of the games you've seen on this video so far, when's the last time you've seen an arcade cabinet for any of them? For me, it's been over 15 years, unfortunately, before I've actually seen one, and that just bums me out because every single arcade board deserves preservation to be playable forever. And for something like Hikaru, a very rare Sega board with a ton of hits on it, it deserves it even more. Will you leave me a comment down below and you tell me what you think, but we're done and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.